Welcome, everybody, to another iteration of Inside Reality. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. This is the co host and the producer, Mr. Jimmy Tran. And we're with you every concluding day of the week, Thursday, Friday, as the week is concluding. That's where we drop the show. And today we're going to be talking about how much oppression is actual oppression. How much oppression is oppression?
Or
And I think
even
that's
what
a
is
really
oppression, really, right?
yeah, we'll define oppression. But at any rate, uh, what we try to do on this show is talk about a topic that's relevant. We try to dissect, the topic dialectically. Jimmy usually takes one perspective, I take the other. A lot of times we agree, but we don't always agree. And that's what's really cool about the show is we're not here to like have some mutual reciprocity, mutual admiration society going on. We have different perspectives. I'm Hispanic. I'm older than this guy. Jimmy's a Chinese guy, younger than me. We got different worldviews, but we're still friends. And we dare to dissect a topic and maybe take a peek at some truth. So I think it's going to be an interesting topic today, Jimmy.
I
All
think
this
so.
oppression stuff that we hear,
Yeah.
ubiquitously through every channel that you turn to. And I'm just sick of it. So let's begin the show with how would you begin to define oppression? And I hate to be, a low hanging fruit guy, but the liberal Democrats have defined oppression basically as what box are you in? Are you a transgender? Are you black? Are you short? Are you fat? Are you this? And whatever situation you're dealing with, they they do two things. They coddle, they embrace being a victim of it, and they define it as beyond your control. And by virtue of this, let's say you're fat and you're Chinese, right? So you're already an Asian guy and you're
There's
fat.
not a
So
lot of
now you
those out
got
there.
now you can rest your lazy fat ass on two platforms. I'm a minority Chinese guy in America and I'm fat. So now I can say I'm oppressed just by virtue of that, right? So kind of expand on your version of what I clumsily just described here.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I
It's
think you're
choking. It's
Chinese, aren't
choking.
you? I think I'm not. I
Yeah,
don't remember.
Chinese, Vietnamese, Jewish.
All right.
I'm a mix
Like,
of sort.
like, like I
Different
said,
mix, but
there you
Portuguese.
go.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. So, uh, yeah. So if we were to just go strict definition from the dictionary, right? I mean, this is prolonged, cruel, and unjust treatment or control.
Okay.
That's what oppression means.
All right.
So, I mean, that's one definition. The other one is the state of being subject to unjust treatment or control. And a third one is mental pressure or distress. So those are the three definitions that were provided by the Oxford, through the Oxford definition
Yeah.
that I found on Google. So
But in a practical way, how do you see oppression manifesting itself? What's the mechanism of oppression in America today, from
well,
your
I
point of
could
view?
I could tell you that if you've ever had children or have to deal with children, I know you don't, particularly like children,
I don't have kids. Don't want
or you don't have
kids.
kids,
Never
but
didn't like me
but if
as a
you
kid.
did, those that are out there that are parents can can relate to a child feeling like they're being oppressed because you deny them whatever it is that they want, whether it's ice cream, whether it's stay up late or go to their friends or whatever it is, right? And so there's that level of it where I think that a lot of times that I think is the type of response that we have among even as an adult. I see that, right, where we never grew up past that point of, oh, poor me, you should do that for me, or you should give me that, or whatever it is, right? So that's one level. It's there's a certain expectation. Now, of course, that is not not the definition of what I just said, except that from the viewpoint of the subject, which is the young child, that's what they feel like. You're oppressing them because you're not allowing them to do what they want to do. Period. Right.
I view what you're saying more as deprivation than oppression. The
Well,
oppression
it's a
I'm
level.
talking about is this binary position that most of the liberals promulgate, and oh, you're Hispanic, so you're obviously oppressed. Oh,
Yeah.
you're Hispanic from a blighted area, so you're triple or double oppressed. Oh, you're short, you're Hispanic, and you're from a blighted area, and your mother died. So now you are oppressed times 4,
Now,
right?
take that.
And
Now, okay,
and so
take that position. Hold on. Take that
well,
position.
I certainly don't, but
No,
that's
no,
a
no, I'm just
position
saying-
it's
well, no.
promulgated.
What I'm saying is take that perspective now, right? And then you lay it on top of Native Americans. All of a sudden now the conquistador, the Spanish, the Hispanic no longer is the oppressed, but now they're oppressors, right? And so this is a game that it's almost like shuffling,
Yeah. What they
musical
don't
chair
tell
type
you,
of-
because I am a New Mexico Hispano, so I basically am 60% Spanish.
Spanish,
And
yeah.
we were part of the group that came here and explored, and there was some
conquered
conquering
this
going on.
area, yeah.
But what they don't tell you, those are my dogs over here conquering each other. What they don't tell you, the lib media apparatus, or the Native Americans that were here before we got here in 1540, 1598, New Mexico, they were wiping each other out.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
tribal
that's correct.
warfare going on among the Navajos, the Apache, the Comanche, whatever, before we got here. And there
And
was,
some of that
yeah.
some of that still
they don't tell
exists
you
in
that part.
yeah.
They were conquering
Yeah.
each other is the point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, every group has had those type of one
course.
versus the other. I mean,
Of course.
anytime you have groups that are near each other, you have the same thing. Here's what's interesting too is that I was watching something. I came across something that I thought was very interesting in terms of the history of the Americas, and this particular individual, I forget his background. I think he was a biologist, and so he was looking at biological, like genetics. He was looking at the history and language, but he was also looking at the different archaeological. So there were like these 3 elements that he was, and what he discovered is that some of the different elements were not as what we've been presented, and he gave a really interesting case study that he did, analyzing those 3 intersections, if you will, and when you bring those 3 elements together, you get a different picture than what is the general narrative, meaning that, which is basically like one group used to say that this is our land. Well, it turns out that wasn't where they were. They were actually at a different area before that, and so they conquered this area and so forth. And so this is where it goes back to, okay, well, who's the, and so you end up with this really interesting game that historically we have conquest in that way, right? I mean, where one group would
Well,
go
you're
out
talking about military
absolutely
oppression
that too.
and conquest. I'm talking about the individual who has no control over whether I was born Vietnamese, Chinese,
Sure.
black, I'm short, I'm fat. Well, being fat is somewhat of a choice unless you have thyroid conditions.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that as well. But there are certain things you can't control, right?
Sure.
Your race,
like your skin color, yeah,
your skin
exactly.
color, your height,
your height,
how
your-
attractive you are, because
Well,
I'm
you
sorry,
can't control.
there is a certain predilection for people to find symmetry in the face to be more attractive than non-symmetry.
Yeah.
At any rate, what the Democrats have done a pretty good job of, and I'm talking about the Democratic machine, the donut-eating influence, Schumers and Pelosi's and the CNNs of the world, is they'll embrace this notion that because someone is black from Chicago and they're short and they're poor, that they're oppressed.
Yeah.
And there is some truth to that, by the way. There is. But those folks still have a choice to navigate through the difficulties economically, the difficulties, because there is prejudice based on the way people look, right? Some of those difficulties as well. There still is racism. And if you're black, there still is racism going on there. But they don't talk about get through those obstacles and optimize who you are. And in other words, fight the oppression. Don't just sit back and acquiesce to the victimization of that position. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, actually,
Yeah.
you bring up a very interesting point, and that is oppression and victimization, because I think that those are the two pillars of this
Yeah.
position. Because you could be oppressed, but you don't have to be a victim.
Correct.
Okay, so that's an important point. Being a victim
Correct.
is a choice that a person makes.
Absolutely.
You know, because you could be, you know, because here's the thing, right? I mean, somebody hits you, you could be a victim and say, oh, you know, so and so hit me, you know, right? And, or you can punch him back. I mean,
you can defend
right? I
yourself.
mean, defend yourself.
Right.
Or you leave the situation. I mean, there's so many different ways to respond. Of course, crying is just one of those ways.
Yeah.
And it's easy to play the victim. And when you do, you get to score points when the political system rewards that type of behavior.
Correct.
I mean, that's really what it comes back to.
Not only the political system, a lot of mass media, a lot of
course.
social media, a lot of pop culture.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to see the new Superman thing going on here in a couple of days until I read that the frickin' producer is like trying to position this Superman character. He's an immigrant.
Well, he's more than an immigrant.
Well, I know,
He's
but
an
I'm
alien.
just saying.
He's even an illegal alien if you
But
really
they're
want to go that
positioning
far.
it in terms of the stupid political cliche
Yeah.
that he's an immigrant and he's saving the world. So they're trying to draw some connecting a dot that all these people that were unvetted, the 20 million that Sleepy Joe let in, that they're basically all going to save us like Superman. That's what he was inferring when he was positioning the Superman character. So I don't even think I want to see it anymore, just based on that nonsensical idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to frame and reframe a story, and that's part of it, right? I mean, that's
Right.
you know, that again, what people do and how that gets played out. My biggest thing is that, you know, if you're going to go down that path, right? I mean, it's interesting to me. It might be an interesting story, okay, but don't lie to me about what your intentions are, I guess, is what I would say.
You're
right?
asking
I mean,
political leaders not to lie to us? Okay.
you know,
We'll be back after these messages. Again, folks, this is Inside Reality, and we're with you at the conclusion of every week, right around Thursday, Friday. You can find us on YouTube. Eventually, we're going to be some other channels. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria, and Jimmy is the producer and co-host. So you're obviously, Chinese. I don't know how the hell old you are, but I know we've been friends. You faced oppression. I don't see you in the 15 years I've known you. I've never known you to be like some little wimpy, you know, I'm a victim, because I wouldn't even befriend you, to be honest with you, if you played that card. No, I don't want to be around people that play the victim card. It's just annoying to me. Now, again, I want to be clear. I've been oppressed. I've been a victim, or I guess I just said I've been the victim per episode in my life of prejudice and bias.
everyone has.
Episodically. But what I did is I confronted it, or I learned from it, or I figured out how to overcome it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just refuse to be a victim. And I'm gleaning from you based on our friendship. I've never asked you directly, but I don't see you as positioning yourself as a victim.
Oh, that's the last thing that I want.
So how did you own a position that you repudiated being a victim as a lifestyle? And maybe that's really a good way to talk about this topic. Being a victim as a lifestyle, which is disgusting.
Yeah. Well,
how did you repudiate that?
Well, for me, I guess I guess part of it is my personality. Maybe I don't know if it's that, but I don't like. Well, for one, I don't like people telling me what to do. Right. So if I'm oppressed, that means that somebody's going to be telling me what to do, and that's like the last thing I want and I like.
Right.
You know. So that's one part that really drives me. You know. I mean, even if it's the right thing, even if it's the better thing, right? If you tell me to do that, that's the last thing you'll want. That's the last thing I will be doing, right? That's just in my nature, I guess.
So you're a bit contrarian. Your nature
in that
is to be
regard, yeah,
contrarian.
and that's why things like this show is great because it allows me to kind of have that outlet to kind of share kind of a little bit of the inside, that a lot of times I kind of keep to myself, which is why I don't, and so one of the other thing that I have, is just I try to observe, and I've observed, a great deal, and as a result of that, I've seen the outcome of what that behavior leads to. So does that mean that I don't experience victimization? No, I experience it at all levels.
Absolutely.
And I also made a very conscious decision. For instance, one of the early decisions that I made was that I refused to be within ethnic kind of conclaves of groups, whatever it is. Okay.
Good point.
Because those were the places where I saw the most oppressive and the most useless and energy wasting activities.
Yeah.
You're not black enough if you're black in a black community, you're not white enough in a white community, and Asian, for me it was Asian. I wasn't Asian enough because, this or that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I get it. You're right. Good point. And also in those little insular tribal little conclaves, or I guess you could call them cliques, it also engenders this synergistic mindset or worldview. Oh, we're all oppressed together.
Yeah.
And there's a certain weird comfort and power dynamic that happens in those little worlds. And you make a good point because, I grew up Hispanic in a largely Hispanic area of a blighted area in Elk Creek, New Mexico. But my grandfather, my aunt, whatever, had the wherewithal to send me to private parochial schools. And there was a lot of true diversity there.
Sure. Yeah.
There was like a guy from Germany, a guy from Sweden, a little girl from Italy, and you're actually seeing real diversity.
Yeah.
But not the kind of diversity like, oh, I need to have a Chinese friend or I need to have a black friend.
Yeah.
So dumb. But diversity in the sense that you're truly getting these different perspectives, different ways of looking at the world, but you're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We're all trying to get good grades and position ourselves to go to the next level, because I was always taught, or it was always expected of me, that I was going to go to college, right?
Yeah.
And I was reviled by my own little insular tribe that all the people that looked like me on South Broadway would ridicule me and my brother. I remember we were playing basketball one time. I must have been like 10 years old. And I said, you've got to observe the rules, whatever. What is this observe the rules? And they were like trying to make fun of me because I was actually eloquent in describing and challenging this guy that, violated a basketball rule. But I refused to acquiesce and succumb to their ridicule.
Sure.
Because they were talking like a bunch of dumbbells, right? That's a good example of a lot of that you described. But again, powering through the difficulty of being ridiculed. And maybe that's why, and I'd like your perspective on this. Again, this is Inside Reality. We're with you every week. Please share this show. Oppression as a lifestyle is sort of easy because you don't have to be uncomfortable.
Correct.
In standing up to the ridicule, not just by external forces that, people that don't look like you, but your own tribe that ridicules you because you're betraying their weakness. In a way, you're betraying their cowardice, right?
It does. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's really what is so powerful about it, right? I mean, of course, the imagery that I had is of a bucket of crabs. Right. I mean, we've all seen crabs, we can't let that guy, get out of the bucket. Right. And so it's easy to kind of keep them in the bucket because they will do it to themselves. So that's one part of it. And I think that that's part of the tool that are used in order to keep the masses in control. I mean, if you really think about it, right. I mean, if each of the little groups are fighting amongst themselves and you let them do it, I mean, they're not going to go very far, right? It's just like the crabs. So that's one part. I think that's why that victimization and oppression type of game.
So oppression is
so
a
that's my
lifestyle.
observation. Yeah.
Is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Why is America so much of America, many populations, I hate to say people of color. Oh gosh, please.
Well, we have at least half of the population.
So people of color
are
welcoming more than I've ever seen in my lifetime the lifestyle of oppression. Here's why. And you just hit on the intrinsic part, because it's hard to break away from your own tribe because you're going to be ridiculed and clawed back or brought back into the bucket. But the other part of it, I think, that's difficult is the extrinsic forces.
Sure.
Because people in power don't want you to be independent thinking.
Yeah.
They don't want you to be sovereign in thought.
No.
They don't want you to have personal courage. They don't want you to have critical thinking because you might dare question them.
Or they become useless or needless.
Correct. You don't need them anymore.
We don't need them anymore. And to me, that is really one of the biggest biggest realization that I had, when I came to realize that's what we've been given, in this country in terms of, our system of governance and everything, is that we actually get to dictate that on every level, really. And this is where I think that's why, this whole idea of, even I know you have a position that America is racist, and I don't, and it's because I feel like that's part of it, because the way that the system, everything is racist when you come down to it, because there's racists in the world. There's differences. Like right now, there's a racist component because we are of different race. So that's one part of it.
Let me clarify that point.
Sure.
I argue, my position is, America was inherently systemically racist for about 150 years, maybe a little longer. I don't think it's systemically as racist or institutionally racist, but I still think it's racist. And I'll give you a quick example, right? I'm, in my 60s or whatever. I remember, again, and I've said this before, when I would watch the Andy Griffith Show, when I would watch My Three Sons, you've never heard of these shows, Brady Bunch, Partridge Family, you'd never see a Hispanic like me. I'm not Puerto Rican, I'm not Cuban, I'm not Mexican, I'm Spanish American. You didn't see us. The only time you saw a Chinese guy was you guys were doing laundry or you were hop sing on Bonanza. And I'm not putting you down, I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
On My Three Sons, I literally never saw maybe one black guy in 40 episodes. And he was a token scientist who was there with one line, yes, Mr. Douglas, or two, I guess that's 3 words or whatever. And you're telling me that's only 40, 50, 60 years ago. And these were number one shows in pop culture. So that's institutional racism, whether we like it or not that long ago. Muhammad Ali talks about the story when he was the world champion and he went back to Louisville, Kentucky in 1965. He went to a Woolworths. They wouldn't serve him a meatloaf sandwich.
Yeah.
He was a world champion. That's not that long ago. So let me clarify. I'm just saying, I don't think we're as institutionally racism in America, but there still is lingering vestiges of racism that are still with us, that are still attached to that institution called, whether it's finance, whether it's pop culture, whether it's media, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to oppression as a lifestyle.
Hold on. You can't make that kind of a drop and then leave me without having my.
We'll be back after these commercial messages.
But I'm not here saying that none of those things happen, right? Yes, racism was part of the fabric of, but that's my point, is that it was so across all of humanity. So it's not unique to just the United States.
Well, that's obvious. But
but
we're always saying that America's not racist.
Well, what my position?
We say that as
no.
patriots and all that.
Well,
stuff.
But my point is that we are probably the least racist country because we have a very clear intention. With, like I said, to me, the Declaration of Independence. I know that you don't agree with the wording, but the wording on face value. I'm not talking about the meaning and the intent and all that, okay? But just on face value, carries the very premise in which, to me, is the vision that I personally have embraced to, And so again, going back to oppression, that's how I, when you ask me how I did it, is by it kind of taking my mind and wrapping it around things like that. Okay.
No, you're a bit of a visionary. You're a bit of an idealist. I'm more of a pragmatist.
Of course, yeah.
So maybe
sure.
that's what. Maybe that's just your natural predilection as part of your nature and proclivity is to see the world more idealistically. I saw my mother die in a car wreck, so I tend to be a little bit more visceral and pragmatic, utilitarian, results oriented. Resourceful in those regards. So maybe I'm a bit more cynical, obviously, than you. But I think that's what makes this show interesting, too, because you have a bit of an ideal way of looking at a topic, and maybe I have a more of a cynical way of looking at a topic. But yet, occasionally, we can come to a certain, like looking at a pen. We're never going to see the same pen exactly the same way, but we can agree that it's a writing instrument.
Sure, exactly.
That's
at the minimum.
Reality. That's
at the minimum,
reality.
Right? Yeah.
That's inside reality. So how can people sponsor the show or, be part of the show?
We have a Patreon link, in the description. Please, jump on and share. I mean, even if it's just for one transaction. I'm working on some merch. If you have some ideas and expressions that you want, I love to, include that as well. But that's one of the things that we're going to do.
Merchandise? Maybe a T-shirt with a pen saying, "Is this a pen?"
Yeah, kind of like that from the. Have you seen the movie The Matrix?
No.
Okay, then I can't use the spoon analogy. Okay, so.
Yeah, I never got The Matrix. I tried watching it. I didn't understand the blue pill and the red pill. I don't know.
It's too visionary for you.
Yeah, it's too exactly. It's too. That's why I didn't like Star Wars. I like Star Trek, the old Star Trek. Because Kirk, he would go from planet to planet and screw the chick, and he'd leave the planet. I mean, it's one thing to I was single for 55 years. I mean, I did some of that tomcatting around, but I would leave her neighborhood. Kirk would leave the planet. He'd screw the chick and leave the planet. Remember?
Yeah.
Well, episode.
Well, what's funny is that when I was growing up, we would try to watch, my sisters and I had 3 sisters, no brothers. And so we would try to watch Star Trek, from the reruns and stuff like that. Never got into the old one. My sister, one time, would say, "I don't like this show because people never die."
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of times it was the same episode over and over.
It kind of recycled.
And if you really dissect, today we're talking about it as oppression as a lifestyle is kind of an easy way to claim victimhood in America. But we're going off on a little bit of a tangent. But the thing about Star Trek, it was really an anti-Vietnam morality play.
Yeah.
That's really what it was kind of about. Because Roddenberry was anti-Vietnam and all that. So if you ever watch the episodes, like the Klingons were sort of I hate to use the word Nazi. It's so cliche, but they were like that autocratic world, and then there were a number of episodes where there were even Asians depicted as.
I think the Ferengis are considered Asian, aren't they?
There you go.
Or that's the representation anyway.
I think that's a different iteration of Star Trek.
But that's the new version. Yeah. I mean,
but anyway, the old Star Trek was anti-Vietnam morality play.
Yeah.
Episode over episode, and also it talked about racism. And remember, there was one guy had white on one side, and the other guy had black on and they looked alike in a sense until the one guy said, "Don't you see the difference? He's black on the right side, and I'm white on the right side." It was like, and that was actually a very poignant, I thought, cogent way of identifying racism. Don't you see his eyes are slanted, or don't you see his skin is dark or whatever? Where an enlightened person doesn't see that.
Well,
right?
Well, you get all these other expressions, like for instance, I would be considered what they call a banana, right?
A banana?
A banana. So I'm yellow on the outside and white on the inside. Just like,
Never heard that.
There's all these different I don't know if it's derogatory, but there's certainly these terms that
Yeah, I
that
think
they describe
that's
different.
probably pejorative, Jimmy. That's
It,
probably
it is.
yeah,
It
yeah.
is, but I mean, I'm just saying that there are all these different groups. I mean, I think that for Hispanic, I think somebody might because they're saying, oh, you're a bit too white, right? Again, this is part of the attempt to try to suppress or at least get
Well,
you
the stereotype. Whenever you saw, again, I'm not Mexican, and people don't recognize there's big differences between
yeah,
Mexican and Cuban and Puerto Rican and Spanish New Mexican like me, right? But whenever you saw sort of anybody kind of like me, it was a fat, big sombrero guy,
yeah,
usually lazy, that had a really thick accent that was basically dumber than a rock, uh, that was not sophisticated at all,
sure,
playing some subordinate role to John Wayne or the Rifleman, or I don't
whoever,
remember
yeah,
Clint Eastwood doing that, but the cliche, dark, stupid, fat, disgusting, non-sophisticated, loser, Mexican.
yeah.
So I mean, I grew up with that. Remember the Frito Bandito guy? I mean, come on,
Mm-hmm. I've heard of yeah,
awful. But
or
we're still talking about oppression as a lifestyle, and I'd like to continue to go down that road. But again, the Democratic machine has done a good job of selling the idea that if you happen to be a non-white, 6'2" tall person with some power, just just be welcomed into this space called victimhood and position yourself as somebody who's oppressed, and we're all going to support that because it keeps them in power and it keeps you dumb and oppressed, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a term called virtue signaling. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
You familiar? And so that's part of I think the game that gets
Define
played.
virtue signaling for our audience.
So according to the dictionary, it's the public expression of opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or social conscience or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. So this is kind of how you can prop up a situation, right? I mean, so if you have oppression, right? If you have oppress and oppression, you can then come to the aid of the oppressed. That's part of the game that gets played.
Yeah.
And so you win a lot of political points that way because because there's this idea of different levels of thinking, right? So you have the animalistic thinking, right? And then you're above that animalistic thinking is this idea where more just above the survival, which is basically very plain matter of fact, what's there is there kind of thing. And then you have much more sophisticated thinking where there's different order of perspective are being considered and everything, and so that's where a lot of the manipulation can get played out, especially if you can say, okay, you're an animal, but we're not going to allow them to call you an animal because you're behaving like that, you're a rapist, let's say, and so you're an animal.
As a reluctant Republican, again, these people that even on Fox, I can't stand those guys on Fox because they're so monolithic. They're MAGA people. I'm not a MAGA guy. Yes, I did vote for Trump twice, but the guy bloviates and he's an egomaniacal guy. But overall, I like his policies.
Just twice?
I espouse.
You didn't vote
policies.
for him
Twice.
Well, he ran 3 times.
Okay, so I voted for 3 times. Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
1 plus 1
for the
plus
record.
1 is 3. Sorry. I stand corrected. Okay. You can
2 out of 3 is not bad.
I don't care. But well, that's a Meatloaf song, by the way. But what I'm getting at is the Republicans don't do a good enough job of saying, if you're a victim, I understand that it happens. They won't even say that, right? I'm willing to say that because I've been a victim of episodic oppression, meaning it happens in episodes. It's not like all the time.
Exactly.
But they don't communicate that way, the Republicans. And the Democrats certainly don't say oppression does happen episodically. Neither of them say or articulate very well, get over it. Do something about it.
About it, yeah.
Get a better job, get more education, lose some freaking weight, stop eating pizza, whatever the hell it is. do something, because nobody wants to talk about inside reality. And the reality is this: life, excellence, achievement is hard. My friend over here, Julius Gaius Caesar, he was self-aggrandizing. He became a dictator for life in 42 BC, but he had to defeat all of France over an 8-year period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was doing it for selfish, self-aggrandized reasons, but even this guy back here, 2,050 years ago, defeated this place called the Gauls, and he came back into Rome somewhat triumphantly and took position as dictator. The point is, he sacrificed.
Sure. Now there's one other.
Because he was oppressed, by the way. Did you know that? Yeah. He was oppressed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's what often happens though. The oppressor.
Got about 8 minutes.
So the oppressed often does, psychologically, the oppressed often become the oppressor, right? I mean, this is something that we kind of see it. That's part of the human. I mean, even with animals. I mean, you can see it, like the alpha dog, right, takes the position, right. And then so the one that is second, will now basically attack the next guy that's not as alpha, and that's that pecking order that gets built into it, and that's part of the animalistic kind of position. And so I think that in many respects, the oppression idea or thought and mindset, so when you have a conquering force coming in, taking over, right? You obviously, if you lose, obviously you're now the oppressed, if you will. But that's only if you, choose to remain there. But you are oppressed because your conqueror, right, have already taken over. Okay, does that make sense? And so, but then there's this process that, at least in the modern world, or even in Roman, I mean, like in the Roman, when Rome went in and took over an area, right, they made sure that the people there locally knew that Rome is in charge, right? And so they set up a prefect and so forth and allowed...
A prefect was like a proconsul governor.
Yeah. To run the...
But let me clarify, because I studied Roman history.
Sure.
What Rome did that was a little different than other oppressive regimes is they allowed the
autonomy,
local conquered peoples to sort of carry on their own mores and traditions.
Correct. Yeah.
As long as they paid taxes.
Taxes, yeah.
And that some of the men, not all, would serve in the Roman military. Rome was one of the first hugely prodigious, successful apparatus that overcame military, or that had military conquests throughout the Mediterranean, that would allow, like the Greeks, right? They allowed some of the Greeks to have their own. In fact, they absconded with, or they commandeered the Greek architecture and some of that.
Pretty much. I mean, the whole.
But to your point, they said we're in charge.
Yeah.
But you can still have your own traditions. That's why there's a misnomer that Christians were oppressed by the Romans. That's not true. It happened in a very local way, and it was usually by the local people who saw the local Christians 2,000 years ago as incestuous and cannibalistic. Why? Because they called each other brother and sister, even though they weren't all brothers and sisters. And the Christians talked about eating flesh and drinking blood.
Sure.
So the oppression of Christians actually it only took place a couple of times, under Nero for a short period and under Diocletian, and then I think another emperor. But other than that, Rome didn't systemically oppress Christians. It happened at local levels by peoples who said these Christians are a bunch of weirdos, and they would be oppressed by their own tribe, but their own fellow community, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and also at the level in which they were kind of causing a ruckus, if you will. I mean, was also a level.
You're right.
Yeah,
because they wouldn't engage in celebrations. They
exactly of the worship of the Roman gods and all that, and so that led to, disturbances that then really wasn't allowed to, so that was part of as far as my understanding, that was some of the things that built up into some of the the turmoil that existed. Of course, those all really evolve in different ways. And of course, when Constantine became emperor, he Christianized the empire, and as such, the shifts that happened. And so,
Well, he did it also because he recognized the inevitability of Christianity, and he did it for a lot of selfish reasons too. I really
Yeah.
don't.
oh yeah,
I'm not
sure.
convinced he actually did it because you got to remember the Romans too, back in this time frame, they were concerned with praying to gods about the present.
Sure,
They weren't in. There was no afterlife for the most
sure.
part. Christianity introduced the idea of afterlife.
Yeah,
So what Christians did was they made religion a transaction. If you do this and believe in this and that and the other,
yeah,
what you're going to get later on is heaven, a place called heaven.
yeah.
Anyway, we've been talking today about oppression as a lifestyle in America. Got about 4 minutes. So any concluding thoughts about why oppression as a lifestyle has become so ubiquitous in many populations in this country?
I think that the biggest thing that I want to underscore is that it's a means of control, and it's not just controlling of the oppressed, but it's also controlling the ability for those individuals that are in that position to be able to get out of, basically unshackle themselves from that perspective. And the victimization. I mean, it's really, if you think about it, it's a further victimization of the oppression of the conquerors.
Yeah, I think oppression as a lifestyle has become very vogue because it's the path of least resistance. I don't really have to do anything about being oppressed. I can celebrate with my little tribe that we're all oppressed together, and you're rewarded with it because they throw crumbs at you. These Democrats and social programs and institutions, they throw crumbs at you. They also can say that you're morally superior because you're seeing the world from that moral perspective.
Yeah.
But it also does something else. It keeps the institutional people of power and influence in positions of power and influence.
And in my mind, that's actually the biggest piece.
Yeah.
Because again, going back to kind of, I mean, it's one part of it. I think it's part of the unfortunate construct of our government system, at least here in the U.S., right? And because when you have the need to bring large masses of people, okay, because that's how you gain votes, right? I mean, you get enough people to participate.
All right, man, we're almost done, but you said something the last show, and it really resonated with me. None of these fat donut eating politicians, whether they're Republicans or libtards, ever say what Kennedy said in 1962, I think. We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Exactly.
Nobody that has power and influence on either side, the Republican losers and the Democrat losers, ever say that out loud. It's going to be hard if you want to be excellent. Yeah. And that's what we talk about on this show. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. Jimmy, thank you.
Tran. Yeah.
Thank you for the show, and we'll see you next week. So share, like, comment. Have a great week.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time.